Hello, welcome to the today class. Today we'll talk about clipping and culling. Uh, these are the today class objectives. Today we'll talk about clipping and culling as the example. We will also discuss view frustum, backface culling, also these hierarchical culling techniques. Also, these operations can be performed in different places in the rendering pipeline. So I wish that you know that actually that there are possible places and then within this rendering pipeline. These materials are covered in the chapter 6 of my book. Before we move on to the today's topic, I went over your questions. Here are some of the questions. Some of you asked that we need to actually, basically I asked you to submit the two questions, right? Then you don't need to submit any more questions through this Google form. So even at that case, even though you submit some more questions through that Google form, the TA won't count it. So actually, if you just submit 2 times, that's enough. And then if you want to know my response and the answer to your question, you can actually you can write down that question at the KLMS. Then I will go over it. Also, the TA will go over them and try to answer your question. Yes, so you can send me the email about the questions, but it might be better for you to write down the questions through the KLMS so that actually all of us can share your question, also the answer. Also, one of you also mentioned that actually he or she got a very interesting observation here. He mentioned that I mentioned that the GPU designed initially to deal with this specific task, right? And as a result, GPU is actually much simpler than CPU, and then as a result, it can be parallelized better than CPU, right? But there also at some point I also mentioned that GPU is getting more flexible, right? And then it can run more programs, right? Then he or she mentioned that then isn't this flexibility making the GPU become like CPU? This is actually the valid observation. Yeah, this is actually true. And basically the CPU and GPU actually they are designed actually different a different way or different task initially, but obviously they are now the CPU and GPU evolving each other, right? So for example, as you can see, GPU actually initially designed for the specific task. In this case, their graphics application, right? But now actually they achieved a very good performance, right? And as a result, they wanted to add more functionality on their GPU, right? Along that line, they're adding more flexibility on the GPU. You might heard that the deep learning, from the machine learning and AI, also that technology also benefit a lot from the GPU, right? Actually, GPU actually one of the most fast these computing devices to run this recent deep learning, right? And basically, the GPU actually getting more diverse and then while maintaining good performance, right? Same thing even for the CPU. CPU actually initially designed for this wide set of the different applications, right? But there also CPU wanted to get a very fast performance on some of the very well performing applications like game. You might heard that actually you can even run the games on the CPU side, right? You might heard that this embedded integrated chip between CPU and GPU, right? Intel also they're providing the kind of this chip, right? So the CPU also dedicated some portion of the chip area, so that actually they can accelerating these the graphics related applications. In a way, CPU and GPU actually they are competing each other. Actually, I don't know who will win in the end, but actually this quite valid observation. And if you're interested, I recommend you to catch up to some of the issues along this line. You will learn a lot of things by by pursuing these questions. Okay, so now let's get back to our today material. I'd like to talk about culling and clipping. I actually in some of the lectures I talked about the high level idea of culling and clipping. Culling is nothing but throw away entire the objective or also the primitive that cannot be possibly be visible, right? And then culling is commonly used as a rendering optimizations, especially for large models that consist of a lot of many triangles. On the other hand, clippings clip away the visible portion of the primitive, which is different from the culling operations, right? And then we usually in this class I will mainly talk about this clipping as an actually very simple method. Also that simplify a lot of many of this rasterization process. Basically, we are talking about so far we are talking about the rendering pipeline, which is actually nothing but rasterization pipeline. We didn't talk about the actual the core operations of rasterization, which convert this triangle into a set of pixels, which will come. I will discuss this concept later on. But actually, the clipping operation that we will talk about today can simplify a lot of the rasterization process. Also, we are not going to talk about this side, but the clipping also used to create this cutaway view. Here, I actually got some image with these cutaway illustrations. By doing that, actually, we can see the internal structure, right? So let me show you some of the example of the culling. Suppose that I actually had this power plant model, which consists of 12 million triangles. You can see that there are a lot of triangles. Also, they're actually within this building is actually power plant. So there are a lot of pipes within these blue triangles, blue box here. So if we actually rasterize and render the full model, we have to send these 12 million triangles from the CPU side to the GPU, right? Obviously, sending the data, also rasterizing all those triangles takes a lot of time. Actually, here this the model, and then this showing this one showing the view frustum. Basically, our viewpoint located here and looking at that direction. But if we from the view frustum culling, it means that basically some of the object here, this one actually located outside of this view frustum, right? So there's no way that we can see that. So it'll be better if we can detect those regions which are the outside of the view frustum. We do not even send the data from the CPU to the GPU, right? If we do that, we can render this whole image by just sending the 10 million triangles from CPU to the GPU, and then only rasterizing those 10 million triangles. That's the benefit of the performing view frustum culling. Obviously, there will be some overhead of performing view frustum culling, but depending on your cases, actually by performing this one, we can get a lot of speed up. Also, in this case, I locate here. So now, actually, this is actually the view of performing this occlusion culling. Occlusion culling is nothing but here. Actually, this is my viewpoint here. I'm located here, but there are some of the objects here that block a lot of my view, right? Because of this occluder, so I cannot see this kind of object here, even though they are within this view frustum, right? Also, there could be I mentioned that there are a lot of the objects within this building, right? There are actually a lot of the pipes, right? But they cannot be even visible, since actually those objects are blocked by wall of the building or this object, right? So if we can identify those occluded part, and then we can perform the occlusion culling. In this case, we just need to rasterize only 1 million triangles, which is a lot of reduce down the number of geometry compared to the rendering the full model. So that's the kind of the benefit of performing the view frustum culling or occlusion culling. Before we talk about those high-level concepts, let's start with the basic component. We do a lot of the culling and clipping against this line or the plane operations. So here, I'm showing the 2D implicit equation for the line. We can actually naturally extend it to the form for the plane in the 3D one, but I will talk about mainly the 2D case. So you might remember that this actually the line equation, especially in the implicit equation. You might remember that this explicit representation of the line with a slope, right? But actually this is actually the more general representation that compared to the explicit one. Basically, starting from this implicit equation, we can actually reformulate with it into the some sort of matrix operations. Then you can see that this x and y and 1, basically x and y is actually 2D point of the line, and then these are you can treat that this kind of coefficient for the line, and then we actually we represent this nx, ni, and minus d as this L here. I put this bar to represent that the coefficient of the line, and then here actually this x and y and 1 is nothing but homogeneous coordinate of the 2D. In the 2D case, actually they are the homogeneous coordinate of those 2D point. Actually, everything can be explained in a homogeneous coordinate setting, but I will just I'm not going to talk about that concept here. But basically, I just it is just enough that you can see that actually there's some connection between this 2D point with the homogeneous coordinate, and then actually that connection will be utilized later on actually, and then. These are the actually equivalent representation of a line, and then you might remember that in this case nx, ny, I just treated this actually normal vector n here, nx, ny. That normal vector is normalized, in other words, the unit vector. Then the d value here, d, actually gives the distance from the origin to this line along that normal direction. You might actually you might actually see this kind of theorem when you studied mathematics in high school, something like that. But anyway, these are actually some of this is actually implicit equation that we will use for the Culling and clipping, and these are the property. N is actually normal, you can treat that N is normal, or the normal of the plane, and then D gives the distance from the origin to the line or the plane. Everything is actually applicable to the 2D and 3D. So then this line or the plane partitioned this space, right? For example, here nothing but basically this point under the point satisfying these line equations, nothing but actually they're actually representing this one. If you put the point located in this line, if you put that point into there, it will give the 0, right? And then in other words, if you put the point, then the line actually the partition this space into this positive half space, also the negative half space. In other words, if you put the point located here onto that equation, it gives you the value bigger than 0. Basically, that's actually that's the property. We can see that. Also, if you put the point located in this region into this line equation, then you will give some value less than 0. That's the property. So that's why I mentioned this line partition this space into the half and the positive side or negative side. And then you can see that if you want to define some sort of this convex region, then you can actually represent each edge with a line, something like that, right? And then you define the actual normal of each line heading outside of this convex region. Then this intersection of this negative half space, the intersection of this negative half space define the convex region actually. So that so based on this line, we can even define this convex region. Then we can easily see that based on this line, we can define the triangle area. Let's just see how we can utilize this line concept, the line for this culling and clipping. Suppose that you actually have this kind of the polygon consists of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 vertices, right? And then this is actually your clipping line. Then one of simple method is that you actually checking every vertex of this polygon against this line. And then if the vertices actually all of vertices give this positive value, you will see that this polygon located outside of this line, right? And then the other case, every point give it a negative 1, you will see that the polygon are located inside of this line, right? And then this that kind of in between case, right? Some of the vertices give the positive value, some other one give the -1. Then you will see that this line straddling this polygon. So then obviously, if you see that actually this line define your view frustum, then if you do that, basically then this polygon is outside of your view frustum, right? Then you can call this you can call away the whole polygon, right? But the issue is here is that there are there could be many triangles. Or here actually in this case this polygon has the 5 vertices. You can checking the every vertices of the polygon triangle against this line takes a lot of time, right? So it has this operation takes overhead, right? So we need to think about it the more effective way of performing this operation. Along that line, we can actually using this conservative test. Given this polygon, we define the center of the polygon. You can just average out the vertices. Then we treat that the center. Then you can also compute the maximum radius. So that if you do that, then you can define the kind of sphere enclosing the polygon, right? While we do that, basically this sphere, the bounding this polygon in a conservative way. Let me talk about why I say this conservative way of bounding. So in this case, suppose I have this sphere, then for Culling, I actually checking the center of this sphere against the line, right? And then this center, when I push this center, the center point to the line, it gives the distance bigger than r. Actually, I didn't mention that if you put the point. If you put the point here, if you put the point against the line equation, it will give the positive negative value, right? But basically that value gives the distance from the origin to the point actually. So you can actually prove it, but for now just take it as some fact. If you're interested, you can also even you can even prove it. So by utilizing that property, then if I actually push plugging this center against this line, then if that distance bigger than the r, right? I mean, they're basically this distance. If that distance bigger than the r, it means that the sphere is actually the outside of this line, right? Then you can actually you know that actually this outside of this whole polygon within the bounding volume outside of the line, then we can call it away, right? But the main benefit here is that you just need to checking only one vertex, right? The center of one compared to actually checking the many vertices, right? Obviously, in this case, you need to compute the sphere, but if you can pre-compute it, the sphere bounding volume, then that's a one-time cost, right? At one time, you can only utilizing that information. And this actually indeterminate cases. Somehow the center, if you plug in the center under the line equation, somehow their distance in between the r and -1. So it's not basically here actually the sphere actually straddling this line. You know that actually this polygon is totally outside of this line, but you just see the bounding volume, right? So since actually the bounding volume, there are some gap between this bounding volume and actual object, right? So even though actually the bounding volume is actually even though polygon is outside the one, in terms of the bounding volume, we can actually decide here whether you'll be outside or inside. Actually, this is the other case. The bounding volume is totally outside. Here, sorry, the totally inside of this one. So this actually we have to rasterize it, and this actually in between case. And then as you can see that actually when you're computing the bounding volume, you can actually save time compared to the checking every vertices. But since actually this bounding volume is not the tight one, there are some gap between the polygon and bounding volume, right? So if you are using the loose bound, suppose if you are using the very loose bounding volume, then you can see that this case happen a lot, right? And then at that case, you don't know whether polygon is outside or the inside, then you need to actually now you need to get back to the prior test. In other words, you need to check every single vertices against this one. In this case, just using the time spent on using bounding volume as actually overhead, right? So definitely when you are using the bounding volume, you want to reduce down the case that fall into this indeterminate cases. Yes. So this is actually just the definition, just the explanation of what I talked about here. Also, we can think about hierarchical calling. Computer scientists love this tree concept, right? Hierarchical concept. So basically, the one of common approach is bounding volume hierarchy, this BVH. So suppose that we have two triangles, and then this for building bounding volume hierarchy, basically we're building the bounding volume in a hierarchical way. So given this set of the triangle, we build this kind of the biggest bounding, the tightest bounding volume. In this case, I use the box, and then we can treat it as a root bounding volume, right? That contain all the object, right? And then we actually partition this triangle into the left and right. Basically, to partition the one, we can just using the median line of this bounding volume that breaking the longest width here. Then given that one, we partition this triangle to the left and this triangle to the right? And then we treat it as a left child of the right child, right? And then we computed the bounding volume here for the left one and the bounding volume for the right triangle. By doing that, basically we're building this kind of bounding volume hierarchy. So here I use the axis aligned bounding boxes. Also when I partition the triangle, I partition the object, right? The triangles. That's why the bounding volume hierarchy, also known as object partitioning hierarchy. At one time, suppose that you actually compute this bounding volume hierarchy, then how can you use it? We can just use the simple traversal algorithm. So suppose that first of all you check whether the top root bounding volume is inside or outside, right? It will be the outside, then we don't need to render it, right? That's very, very simple. Then we can call away all of these triangles in terms of rasterizing. But suppose that it's the indeterminate cases, and then you need to refine. You need to actually go down to the left and right children node, and then you actually you checking the same operation again and again, right? And then check it whether inside or outside. It's inside, right? Then you don't need to traverse deeper, right? You know that if this bounding volume is inside, then you know that all of the triangles are inside, right? Then you need to render. If it's the right one indeterminate, you don't know. You need to actually refine further. Indeterminate, then at this case you need to rasterize each individual object. And then at that case, if the outside, then you know that all the contained objects outside, so you can also cut away. In this case, you don't even need to render them. That's how we utilize this bounding volume hierarchy. So actually, the long time. Actually, I got some of my work received the Test of Time Award, 2006 award at the 2015 at this conference. It's basically it's nothing but I just utilizing this bounding volume hierarchy for ray tracing actually, and I actually with my co-authors are also we actually had a paper at 2006, but somehow this technique actually has been used a lot. Also, this technique also used a lot for the ray tracing in these days. So actually, we got this kind of award. So basically, it's either very simple. We knew that actually we used this bounding volume hierarchy for this kind of calling, also calling, especially for the collision detection. And then around that time, this ray tracing actually becomes popular again in terms of research. So to us, actually, it's very natural to using the bounding volume hierarchy for the ray tracing. I'd like to actually share this information with you. Somehow at this time, actually, at that time, I didn't expect that I will receive this one. Just I did my best to put out this paper. Somehow, fortunately, I got this kind of recognition. My work actually received this kind of recognition. Anyway, I'd like to point out the bounding volume hierarchy very widely used for this calling, clipping, also collision detection and ray tracing. Basically, ray tracing actually they're becoming more popular in terms of the movie, also the even game. So I will talk about this concept later on. Now let's get back to our material. Now I'd like to talk about view frustum calling. Here this is our view frustum, right? I talked about how we can do the calling, clipping or calling against the line, right? And then in case of the view frustum, actually each face of the view frustum actually plane, right? So we can very easily extend it to the line comes into the plane. But for the sake of simplicity, I will talk about everything in the concept of this 2D. And then we can actually do the calling clipping against this kind of view frustum, right? You can define this line of plane with the line equation or plane equation, right? But you know that through the transformation, at some point we need to transform into the canonical view volume, right? Box. Also the canonical view volume even in empty space. So at some point this view volume mapping to this kind of box or the cube, right? That spans from between -1 to 1, right? And then even at that, when you do that kind of transformation into the NDC, you can do the culling and clipping even at that space, right? But there could be some of the benefit of the performing the clipping culling in this case. At that case, basically the user defined this viewable information, right? Then there could be some sort of for this line or the plane, there could be some sort of the arbitrary coefficient, right? But we know that if we convert this one into empty space, then this line mapping to this line, and this line actually has the line coefficient, right? Basically this line coefficient is normal, right? Basically that heading toward that direction, so this is 1, y component is 0, and this actually you might remember this actually -t, right? So this line actually located the 1 unit away from the origin, right? So that's why you got -1. So at that space, actually, we only know what are the actually clipping coefficient, right? We know the clipping coefficient, so that actually we can more efficiently performing these various operations within that space. Okay, I talked about the view frustum culling. Also, there are another simple one is the backface culling, right? So suppose that is our view here, and then somehow we actually have this kind of convex or closed object, right? Then you know that actually we can see there the front facing the triangle, but if there are back facing one, there's no way we can see that, right? So that's why actually we want to identify this kind of the back face, this triangle with the back face, and then we want to call away. That's actually known as back face culling. This kind of basically we can apply this concept for this convex object. Convex also this closed object. Now let's look at how we can do this kind of the backface culling. Suppose that we're actually talking about here the model that consists of a triangle, right? So given this triangle here, V0, V1, V2 vertices, right? We can define this normal of the triangle, right? So here we define given this triangle, we look at one vector here and another vector from here to there, right? Two vector, right? And then by performing cross product, you will get the normal direction along that line, right? And then we also computed we can compute the d coefficient of the line, right? Basically this actually implicit equation, right? And then once we actually had suppose that this is actually your triangle, something like that, and in this case it's triangle, right? And then your viewpoint located that direction, right? So basically that's the positive side, then you know that's actually front facing, it's visible. But the other case, in this case, that triangle, you know that the normal locating there, and then you know that the viewpoint, if you plug in the viewpoint into the plane equation, this equation, then you will see that actually they will give the minus, then you know that that's backface culling. This is actually one type of one implementation of realizing this backface culling. Actually, there could be many other approaches, but I mainly talk about one option here. So already OpenGL provides this backface culling since it's one of the most common actually operations. So how you can do that? So basically, if you want to do the backface culling, so you need to define you can run this one. So you need to enable the call phase, GL call phase, right? And then you also you need to define. You can set what kind of phase you want to call. In this case, I want to call phase. That's the GL back phase, right? Also, the OpenGL require you to define what's the actually front phase and how we can interpret the front phase. Basically, we represent the front phase by utilizing the winding order of the counterclockwise of the vertices. So here, we got the V0, V1, V2. So you know that basically the normal heading there one, right? So and then we compute this vector. Basically, then in a way that by interpreting this the vertices into counterclockwise, V0, V1, V2, right? That way we compute the two vector and compute this normal. So basically that's the way of defining front face from the winding order of the vertices, and then we do that. And then also this kind of odd one. This also we can do the front face culling. I don't know in what case you need to do you want to do the front face, but I'm showing you this image. Okay, so now I talked about some of the back face culling, some other different culling approach. Now I just talk about clipping. Suppose that somehow this is some of line. You can treat that this is actually frustum line on the plane, and then you have actually somehow there's a edge of your triangle or something like that, and then this basically the triangle has this one edge here, the P0, P1, right? And then obviously you need to clip away this portion, right? And this like the line occasion for this your clipping region. Then first of all, you need to check whether these two end point of the edge is totally outside, inside, right? Then at that case we don't need to do the clipping, right? But now somehow this line clipping line straddling this edge, so we need to do this clipping, right? And then so you need to identify this let's say P dot, right? So to compute this intersection point, you actually parameterize any point under this line with the parameter of t. This is actually just a linear interpolation starting from P0, computing vector, and then we interpolated it. We represent any point here with the parameter t. And then if you plug this P prime onto the L, it should be 0, right? And then as a result, if you plug in this P dot, this equation into there, you get this equation. And then if you do some of the reformulation, then you can compute the t, right? It's a very simple equation, but probably you need to actually pause this video and then spend some time to actually reformulate this equation. Then you will see that you can get this one. Okay. Also, when you do the clipping, actually, also you need to compute you also compute this position of the P dot, right? P prime. But sometimes actually also you need to compute this vertex attribute. For example, this one has a red color. This one has a blue color. Then the color actually varying from here to there, right? Then what are the color to here, right? You need to assign also color for this clip the vertex, right? But also you do the actually same operations. You can do the linear interpolation between this color by utilizing this t value, which is actually the interpolation is parameter. So now let's talk about how we can do the clipping in this rendering pipeline. There could be actually it's a little bit difficult now. Actually, I will talk about a little bit complicated issue here. Suppose that you actually have some of the vertex x, y, z, and 1 in homogeneous coordinate in the 3D space. Then if you do the view projection transformation, right? We actually talk about this view transformation, also the projection transformation before, right? If we apply that matrix, then we will get this kind of new coordinate, right? X prime, y prime, z prime, w prime, right? And then you may remember this actual we used this homogeneous coordinate for realizing this perspective projection, right? And then you might recall that to actually performing the perspective projection, we need to make this first homogeneous coordinate to have the 1, right? So that actually we divide everything with this homogeneous coordinate. That's known as homogeneous divide. Then if we do that, we got this coordinate x prime divided by the w prime and so on, and the first homogeneous coordinate turns out to be 1. Actually, when you do this homogeneous divide, that's actually where we actually performing perspective projection. Can you recall why? So you might recall that the homogeneous coordinate actually contain the value related to the depth, g value, right? Then if we visualize it actually, at that space, our view space actually, our view volume looks like this, right? Then at that case, if we do the homogeneous actually divide, also there are a lot of the also there also a little bit complicated is the transformation, then mapping to the from here to the empty space, right? Then our view volume looks like this. This one mapping to there, right? So actually there are at high level there are 3 different places where we can do the clipping. Let's say I will say this option 1, option 2, option 3. There are actually 3 different coordinates. We can do the view frustum. For example, if I want to do the view frustum clipping against the view frustum, I can do the clipping here. Also, there I can do the clipping in this canonical space, right? But also we can do the clipping even at that space, right? Before there is the homogeneous divide, but after there is the view projection transformation. We can do this clipping in one place out of the 3, right? What could be the best place in terms of the performance? Also, we want to do in terms of performance, right? Actually, it turns out that the clipping, if we do the clipping in this option 2, it will give the actually best result actually. So basically, there are a lot of study, and then depending on the application, is game. They might try around option 1, option 2, and other one, and then the people actually settle down their. If we do the clipping in this space, this might be the best. So that's why actually we typically say that this actually clip space, another name. So since we do the clipping even mainly in this space, you can this actually has a name of clip space. Now let's talk about why we do the actually clip space. But the problem is that if we do this clipping, the view frustum clipping in the empty space, it actually makes sense. It seems like reasonable that we can do the clipping here, right? But it actually we should not do that. If we do that, it actually we are not getting this correct result. Suppose that this is our view frustum, right? This is our eye view frustum. We have the line here. Then obviously one can expect that if we do the clipping, then we actually clip away this line here and there, and then this line may be mapping to there, right? This actually they are mapping to there, right? If we do the perspective project, this point is actually the mapping to there, and then let's say this point is mapping to there, right? So ideally, if we clip there correctly here, then this line actually mapping to the somewhere here, right? But if we actually do we got the very different result. If we do the perspective projection, then this point mapping to there. If we do the perspective projection for this point, then mapping to there, right? It means that then if we do the projection, everything's if we do the for those 2 vertex, if we do this kind of transformation, and at that case, they are actually mapping to here. And then you can see that if we do the rasterization, in other words, they're converting the line into the pixel, then we actually fit into there, right? Which is actually very different result. Why we got this one? So if we do perspective projection, actually, here this point mapping to there, this point mapping to there, but at some point they're mapping there. But this case actually now here they keep actually mapping to there. But at some point when the point passing through this plane, they are now reversed to the here, right? That's why actually it got if we do all the perspective projection we done and we do the clipping, it actually we got a very incorrect result. So it turns out that actually option 3 is not actually valid one. So then other valid options only the option 1 and option 2. Now what's the main benefit of doing the clipping in option 2? So let's get back to here. So here in option 1, basically the coefficient of this line is actually arbitrary, right? But here option 2, we can actually compute we can also we already know they are mapping to when you are doing this one, we already are performing NDC transformation, right? So we know that what are the coefficients mapping to this line or plane. In other words, it's prefixed, right? So that there's a way that we can optimize it more. So that's why actually we are doing the calling clipping here. Now let's just see what are the actual coefficients there. It will be very complicated, but so in this case, here this actually the x-axis here, and then here I'm showing this this homogeneous coordinate space. You will actually remember that homogeneous one actually relates to the g coordinate, right? So intuitively you can treat that this the w space mapping to actually depth. I mean has the clear relationship with the depth. Then if you look at if you visualize view frustum in here, then you will see that basically this line actually has this w equal to x. Why? If you do the homogeneous divide, then it means that if you divide with this coordinate with the x and the w, then it turns out that after homogeneous divide, it will be the 1, right? This actually mapping to the that space, right? That's why, but we need to roll back this homogeneous divide here. So if we roll back this one into there, then you can see that this has this this equation, and then the other one is actually w is equal to minus x, something like that, right? And then suppose that you have a line here. This this the line coefficient, and then consists of v0, v1. Then your line equation, this line equation. So suppose actually there just in this case their normal actually there turn out to be there 1 and minus 1, also there 0, right? This just a simple I just assume that the line equation has this one, and then also I define that this vertex, the v0, v1 actually has this coefficient, right? And then given this setting, this is actually my assumption. If I starting from there, and then I mentioned about the technique for the clipping line against another line. If I plug in this equation to there, then actually I computed I can actually compute it also I actually parameterize the point within this line with the t value. Then t value corresponding to there can be computed like this. I know that it is a little complicated, but actually, if you look at my book, actually I talk about these issues in a more detailed manner in my book. So if you go to my book, this is my homepage, right? This book homepage. If you're looking for the clipping culling here, then clipping culling to chapter 6, then you can see that you can see that all the materials actually covered here. You can see the more detailed explanation actually. Also I've actually mentioned that I actually talk about some fact, right? Here actually I even actually proved that kind of the information that I actually assumed in this class, and also there you can see that is same information here, and what are the actually pros and cons, and then how we can do how they're actually the coefficients and mapping here and there. I recommend you, if you're unclear on some of the material here, I recommend you to look at go over my book. Then you will see that actually there are more information. And then also if you see that when you're reading my book, if you're unclear some part of the book, or if you have some question, then also send me an email, also write down those questions at the KLMS. I will do my best to improve to answer your questions. Also that when I hear your feedback, also you give me the feedback so that I can actually modify, refine my book. Okay, so basically based on this one, we can do this clipping in I think that I mentioned this line coefficient and mapping to there. Sorry about it. This line coefficient and mapping to here. This one. Sorry about that. And then obviously this one. Then you can see that this line this line coefficient has if you look at the normal up here, they're heading to that direction, right? You can see that this one is that when you're taking the one along the x, then it will go along the w, it goes down one unit, right? So it's the -1, and then this one actually passing through the origin. So that's why D the minus d turn out to be 0. Yeah, sorry about that. I thought that this representing this line, no, this line coefficient mapping to there. I should modify this one into there. Yeah. So based this one, we can do the clipping with the prefixed coefficient without having this issue. That's why we are doing the clipping in this space. Okay, so this actually some of the illustration of the classical the random pipeline. So you can do so here actually when I do the trivial project rejection, we can do the view-frustum calling, right? You can do the view-frustum calling after model transformation, but usually view-frustum calling performed in the application level. In other words, you do the calling by yourself and then passing down the triangle through the OpenGL. So where we do how we can do the view-frustum calling, you need to develop your own algorithm, or that's the main reason why we are doing the recent rendering engine. If you are using some of the recent rendering engine, they provide this view-frustum calling. Also, the view-frustum clipping and backface calling can be done here. The clipping, when you do the clipping right? But actually, we can also do the backface. Also, later on, I will talk about rasterization. But actually, over there we can very easily perform the backface calling actually. So typically we don't do the backface calling, not here, but here actually. I will get back to that issue later on. Right. So in summary, so far I talked about clipping calling, and there are some of the examples: view-frustum, backface calling, and hierarchical calling. Also, there could be the many options where we can do the sum of operations, right? So there's no prefix the place for each operations. Basically we are talking about engineering issue. There could be many places where we can do the certain operations. They always trade off. So you need to think about it. What are the trade off? And then we talked about one space, especially for the clipping. We talked about clip space. But when things are changing, when your algorithm changing, your hardware, your software changing, then might be later on we might do the clipping and some other operation in another place. That's the kind of you should aware of that's the kind of the nature of the evolving field, especially computer science and computer graphics, which is keep changing, right? Okay, so these are the general homework. Go over the next lecture slide. Also, watch 2 figuration video. Submit your summary before the every Monday class. Also, submit your question 2 times. And then just 2 times enough, right? And then if you have other question where you want to know the answer, share the question through the KLMS. I will do my best to answer your question. Next time I'll talk about rasterizations. That's it. Thank you. Bye.